right, welcome back. If you're just joining us, good morning. And you're just in time for press review. I have Edward Wanyonyi with me here. He's a communication analyst, and he'll help us go through the local daily and sort of mix it up. So we're going to take a look at the Saturday Standard this morning. First of all, Edward, good morning. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Welcome.
Are you not going to watch the royal wedding?
I wish to.
You're not part of the 1 million girl, the one who paid 1 million?
I think I should.
Don't worry, you get to watch it here for free.
Okay, fine.
So let's take a look at the very first page.
Yes.
On the Standard Group, on the Standard page this morning, we are running with two big stories. First of all, the fact that Governor Sonko is saying, and I quote, "Bring it on." Sonko declares this whole issue with his deputy nominee, that is Miguna Miguna, as well as the NYS scam, which has so far claimed 2 people. Before we go into that, let's just start with the first one, which is on page 2 this morning. The game on, Sonko tells Uhuru's men. So we've seen quite a number of people, quite big numbers, come out to say that all this that Sonko is doing is just a distraction from his administrative performance, which he got a D+ earlier this week from Kenyans, more specifically Nairobians. Edward, what do you think, first of all? Is this just an entire distraction that Sonko is playing around?
I think it's a failure on leadership on his part, and he would have to cast around blame to other people and think about and say it's a vacancy in terms of the office of the deputy governor. But I think the ordinary Nairobian does not care who is in power, who is not. They just want services to be delivered. It's unfortunate that with one hand, Sonko talking about the fact that revenue has increased, but you're not seeing a translation of the services.
Right.
Terms of the...
Someone said that Nairobi potholes have potholes in them. Services are just getting worse.
Yes.
The raining and the flooding.
Yes, and remember, just I think in 2016, Governor Nero, when he was there, he had actually put in place a disaster management team. Sonko has not come out to explain what is happening with that disaster management team. We are not seeing any kind of efforts going on in terms of, do we have the right kind of response that is required in terms of ambulances, in terms of, evacuation, in terms of marking of buildings which are unsafe? So we are not seeing so much, and at such a time, we're just hoping that it's like nothing will strike this town. So
do you agree with what David Mura, the Jubilee chairman, was saying earlier this week, that all this is just a fiasco to distract Kenyans from Sonko's performance?
Ideally, it's unfortunate, because if he was performing, no one would actually bother whether he has a governor. He would not even go into the business of thinking about nominating or not nominating. I mean, he will just be working. Governors who are working are working. They are not even talking about any other kind of vacancy.
Right.
We never saw this kind of noise when there was a vacancy more or less in Nyeri County.
Yes,
there was no kind of gap. Services were being delivered, It's not the first time you have a vacancy in the office of the deputy governor. I mean, he needs to understand that services do not wait for the political process to take place. So he may want to get an A rating in terms of being, a political conniver and a maneuverer in tight spaces. But do we really need that right now at the expense of services?
Quick question. Do you think that having Miguna, first of all, do you think he will accept it?
I don't think the issue is actually about even whether he'll accept it or not. The issue is, one, does the matter which is in court, has it been solved?
Yes, yes.
And number 2, the question is, at what level is he going to come in?
What is this is his ticket back into the country.
But he doesn't need a ticket back to the country. The law is very clear. The judges rule that he has a right to come into the country. The political class not accepting him to come back is a different matter.
And do you think that they will work hand in hand? Because someone else is saying this is just a disaster waiting to happen. You have both Miguna Miguna and Sonko working together. If Polycarp Igathe, one person who was in the corporate field, well-respected, could not even handle working with Sonko, someone was saying, let's just carry a camera around Sonko and Miguna and come up with our own keeping up with Kenyans because of the drama. Do you think those two will even work together?
I even don't think the issue is about whether they will gel together, because that's something which can be handled in terms of, the clear terms of reference and job descriptions. The problem is there is this whole argument that Nairobi should be re-centralized, should be taken back by the national government. And so amplifying part of the failures and challenges in terms of managing Nairobi can be an issue. So the issue is the dynamics that are going to be in place. Can the county assembly also put in place the kind of support system for any deputy governor who will come in place? Does the national government, now that it wants to invest more in Nairobi, have the opportunity to actually manage cartels at that national level who are actually invested in Nairobi County? So there are dynamics which are beyond who occupies the office.
Right. Okay. Let's see how this plays out.
We should.
It'll be quite interesting.
I think so.
All right. Let's another big story for the week, given that today is May 19th, is the royal wedding. So on page 3, take a look at that. Her wedding dress alone costs about 33 million Kenyan shillings. The cost of her cake, 1.3 million. The cost of flowers, 6.7 million. 1 million is what a couple will pay to watch the wedding live at the luxurious Windsor Golf Club. So it will be airing at around 12 p.m. in London, 2 p.m. here local time. This is quite a big step for the royal family, would you not say? Having someone who is of a mixed racial coming into such a high occupied scenario. This speaks volume.
Yes, it speaks volume. I think the last time we had such kind of an issue coming up was during the time of Princess Diana and Dodi Al-Fayed.
Right.
And there was now that whole issue whether the royal family is actually open to the outsiders or to any person from the outside. But it's interesting. But also, Markle has actually been able to stand on her own.
Right, she has a career.
I mean, yeah, she has a career. She's a success in her own way. She's fought her own battles. I think the challenge for me is for people to accept not her remarrying, but just accepting that Markle has stood up. And that is the whole notion of how you frame gender conversations, that people want to think that it's actually the royal family which is opening up. They're not seeing the part that the lady has also stood up and she's measured up to the level where she deserves to be at that level.
And she can be accepted.
Yes, and she can be accepted.
What did you think when you heard about the whole issue that her father wouldn't be able to walk her down the aisle due to the heart surgery that he was having? I'm sure that must have also touched her wrong.
Yes.
Yeah.
But I think it's just management at the family level. Well, because, I mean, you really cannot stop a train which is outside the from the station. I think the family should have stepped in and, buckled up all their issues and, allowed her to be able to move towards her new phase. Whether or not the claims that the father is actually putting are true or not, the question is, why are they so timely?
Right. For that heart surgery to have happened the week that her daughter is getting married.
Well, yes. And of course, we don't know the doctor's report in terms of severity, but it doesn't look like a situation whereby it's a matter of life and death.
Here's the other thing. We've talked about the fact that Meghan herself has already created herself to be a sort of brand.
Yes.
There are some things that she might have to give up. I was actually watching it. It's quite interesting. First of all, her acting career, that's done. She will no longer give out signatures because any royal signature is sort of, is by law, is quite legal because you can have that forged elsewhere. So whereas celebrities easily give out their signatures to their fans, she can no longer do that. I heard that the Queen has insisted that she has to wear stockings like all the others. I mean, it's quite interesting, this new lifestyle that she has to now adapt to. Do you think that this also has a price to pay for by the time you are getting into such a high level authority? Because the other thing is that she can't even have political views anymore. And Meghan is one woman who is quite passionate about things that have to do with society.
I think it's just a swap. It's a swap in the sense that one has to leave some aspects and take others. So in this space, she can start a foundation. She can do so much in terms of championing a public cause, an issue that is dear to her heart. Prince Harry is doing something about, wounded soldiers and organizing games and opportunities for them. Actually, he has a foundation to his name for supporting wounded soldiers because he served in the British military. So Meghan can take up a cause and actually use the opportunity that right now she's in the royal family now to actually influence a lot in terms of policy, especially using the kind of connections she will have. She can do backroom networking
and
for
her
courses,
popularity, right,
that are now there. It gives us access to present actually courses to hire people, whether it's within the British Parliament or within other royal establishments, which, as you understand, policy takes place behind the scenes. So I think she just swapped positions. It's not that she's changed, actually, and she's gone to a loss.
All right, there's another story that will probably grab your attention as well, is the fact that KDF troops are beginning to gradually withdraw from the war-torn Somalia after the UN vote. So that is on page 4 of the Standard this morning. Allow me to just give you a highlight of that. So the first drawdown of 200 KDF soldiers happened last year in December around 2017, with another 200 scheduled to leave this year in December 2018. And by 2022, AMISOM troops would have contributed. Countries are expected to have also mentored Somalia security agencies and handed over security responsibly. However, the transition is part of the AMISOM's withdrawal strategy, reached after consultation with the stakeholders before the declaration of the UN Security Council. What are your thoughts on this?
I think for me the challenge which we have, especially in terms of Somalia, is that AMISOM has never tightened its security policy in terms of not only just the fact that are they dispersing Al-Shabaab, or are they actually redeeming and, getting space? Because as you see, the attacks on soldiers has just affected the morale of most of the countries contributing to the force.
True.
So literally meaning that in as much as they have been in Somalia, what is the transition approach?
So is this a step back for AMISOM?
Of course, in terms of looking at its effectiveness, when you're trying to now evaluate peacekeeping missions,
right,
the gaps which actually we thought had been addressed earlier on in terms of UN missions in Sierra Leone or in South Sudan, we are seeing those gaps still there. The question now, when now they draw back, will Al-Shabaab now step up? Does capacity of Somalia security forces, is it up to standard?
Right.
That is the question. And 2020 is not far.
And Somalia also now has to really look at the quality of its security. If AMISOM comes out, if Kenya withdraws, will they be able to handle their country?
Exactly. And also for Kenya, the question is, if KDF is in Somalia right now, and we're still having cross-border attacks, what happens when they withdraw?
And all this started back in 2014 with the Linda Inchi operation that we saw.
Yes.
And Kenya then became quite a big victim when it comes to terrorism.
Yes.
Do you think that now KDF, even pulling from Somalia, will see any change?
Now it depends with the Kenya national security structure and what they decide in terms of what will be our security orientation towards this issue.
Right.
As it is right now, we are seeing challenges in terms of more increased cross-border attacks. I think just 2 weeks ago, we lost a number of soldiers. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge.
So, and you say 2020 is not too far off.
It is not too far.
It's not too far off. Page 5, which we are leading with this morning, of course, is also one of our biggest stories. That NYS scandal. 2 people have had to step down. The Principal Secretary of Youth, which is Lillian Bogo, as well as the NYS Director General Richard Dubai, have stepped down in order for investigations to go through. And President Uhuru Kenyatta said if they are found guilty, prosecution will then follow immediately. Do you take Uhuru's word in this for this?
I just want to see, that is the same thing which happened some time back, it has been always a question where he promises, but ideally, in terms of separation of powers, you can actually see that he has to rely on the DPP. Now, the question is, to what extent will the DPP actually bring serious, tangible evidence that can actually convict?
And is even the DPP's office well empowered to go ahead and convict some of these big, powerful people that we're seeing?
They are empowered. The question is due diligence among the investigating officers.
Right.
That is the problem we are having in this country.
And that's the center of it all, whether those investigations will be compromised.
Yes. The veracity of the claims that are going to be brought in court should be watertight to the extent that actually a magistrate looking at all these issues, they say, you know what, you're guilty. Like we have seen in the case of ex-mayor of Nairobi, Gakuo, and who was charged and convicted the other day. So the question for me is, to what extent is the DPP going to ensure that he has a very tight IO and the prosecutor will actually bring so much evidence that can actually be incontrovertible, because otherwise it will be a question whereby they will just reach a state whereby they will not have a case to answer.
General question, and not really on this one. I just want to get your ideas on this. Do you think corruption here in Kenya, we've over-politicized it?
I think corruption as it is, simply because it's a vice of personal enrichment.
Right.
It's political. It doesn't have to happen in a political setting or not. It's already a political matter because it's self-enrichment.
In its nature,
it's
right.
its nature. The question is, to what extent are the people who are perpetrating it, who are in public service, given an impunity allowance, whereby they know if they get into a place whereby there's compromising, they would have to steal. That is an impunity allowance that we have given them. So the question is, to what extent do we want to limit? Do we want to withdraw it right now? Because if, for example, there is a whistleblower who comes out with some of these issues, and he's immediately arrested and told spreading malicious information, then what you're doing is that you're compromising anyone who will actually come out. And so you are actually extending that impunity allowance.
Do you have confidence that Mr. Kenyatta will really work on corruption and fighting this dragon slayer in his last term? Because what does he have to lose?
He never put it as a part of the Big Four. Actually, he never mentioned it anywhere within the Big Four, that anti-corruption is going to be an issue.
In his State of Nation address, he mentioned a sentence or so.
Yes, but you see, a sentence does not necessarily mean action. I mean, he's a politician. He has to mention something because you want to be politically suave. But it doesn't necessarily mean commitment. Commitment means you actually ensure that there is, a standing order within the cabinet that ensure that cabinet secretaries ensure that everyone under their ministries abide by that and say anti-corruption is going to be a zero. But does it happen?
All right, Edward, let's see whether investigations will be carried out properly and whether the prosecution will happen accordingly. So that's on page 5, our big story, the NYS 9 billion scandal. Let's head over to the next page, which is quite also interesting, especially after the cyber bill was passed earlier this week. Now, about 5 million. I just want to read for you some of the charges in regards to this. Any offense under the Fines Act, the fines under the Computer Misuse Cybercrime Act for 2018, unauthorized interference will cost you about 10 million Kenyan shillings and 5 years in jail. Unauthorized interception will also cost you about the exact same thing. But here's the thing. Illegal devices as well as access codes will cost you about 20 million Kenyan shillings and double imprisonment of about 10 years. Computer fraud, 10 million, imprisonment of 10 years. Child pornography will cost you 20 million if you are caught with that, an imprisonment of 25 years. But here is what is interesting and that has caught also the attention of people, even as we're trying to curb pornography as well as cyberbullying. The false publication, what is called fake news, it will cost you 5 million Kenyan shillings in about 2 years. Here's the thing, Edward. A lot of people are saying that this specific part of the bill, the false publications, especially if you tweet it, is infringing people's expression, freedom of expression.
True. And the question for me is, when legislation is actually taking place and you have a sort of obsession with higher fines, and then you try to generalize and say child pornography is the same as forgery. Computer forgery. And you can be able to actually look at it and realize that there's a challenge in terms of how the balance of penalties is being meted out. And the same thing happens with this issue of, criminalization of fake news. Because that means you cannot call out. And, there's no even special schedule that actually says that this particular section actually exempts, journalists who are accredited and are working with the media house because that is their role and that is their duty.
You already seen Alfred Mutua who tweeted yesterday the whole issue that a specific journalist, and he even had to quote the cyber bill attack. I mean, this specific cyber bill
which
part
is unfortunate because it has not yet been operationalized. We are not yet between 14 days after the assent. So, and Mutua, you expect him at his level to have understood the basics.
Given the fact that he was a lecturer before.
He understands media law and ethics. He understands how to operationalize a law which has come into place.
So it's a big win on one side, the whole pornography, the whole
But we're waiting for
forgery.
it. Yeah. We're waiting for it. We just want to see when it will be now put in force so that the first person who will be, charged with this, we can now go to court and ask, the court to actually strike out some of these sections. Because that is the idea. You cannot just be able to load over as parliament a bill that actually protects you because of the case that happened, some time back with the women MPs, the case that happened with the Deputy Governor of Nairobi, and then say, now, we want to be protected as the people who are in power. But also I like about this law, on the other side, is the whole issue of cyber stalking. Because that is now the issue, because if you look at popular sites within social media, people are being unveiled in a not so polite manner. They're being unveiled there on matters which are totally, fictitious and cooked up. And so this cyber stalking bill, I think the clause on cyber stalking, I think it's timely. It's timely.
All right, so. Let's see what will happen, especially in regards to that aspect of the fake publication, which will cost you about 5 million Kenyan shillings and 2 years imprisonment. But also on page 7, Edward, is that issue where President Uhuru Kenyatta has said that he does not want any laws to be changed. Here's the thing, first of all, before we dive into this, do you see us as a nation going into a referendum this year?
I think the history of this country is unfortunate in the sense that whenever elites discuss a particular matter and they have the mobilization power within parliament, they can be able to enact. And you see, that is just the procedure. We've put a procedure that if you want to go to a referendum, you need X, Y, Z to be put in place.
Now, here's the thing. After the handshake happened on the stairs of Harambee, President Uhuru Kenyatta now says that he doesn't want any laws to be changed. Is that the end of that handshake now?
Not at all. But as you say, you realize very well, the handshake does not have a legal mandate. It is not like what we had between President Kibaki and former Prime Minister.
But there goes Kenya's honeymoon experience.
Yes.
We've enjoyed for about now 2 months.
Ideally, but it was just, I think, for me, a matter of managing, the public, and because there was a challenge. I mean, this country, with that grandstand that was there, it was becoming an issue in terms of how to even engage with these whole issues, like the economy and the other commitments that the country has outside the political realm. But the handshake as it is right now, it is not anchored in any law. It has not been, there is no amendment at a second place in Parliament that gives it a legal backing.
Right.
So whatever they decide at a handshake level, I think they're just mere pronouncements.
Even after Raila has called for a referendum last month.
He has a right to call for a referendum, just like you and just like I. The question is, to what extent are they going to mobilize their political constituencies to actually go to a referendum? But the question is, are we going to be in a political cycle for almost 20 years?
Year in, year out.
That is the challenge. Other countries are moving ahead. Other countries are making progress. That money that we are spending in this kind of election, that kind of referendum, all that money could actually be channeled to help a lot of issues that are pending in this country.
And even with the wrangles within IEBC itself, if we were to go for a referendum, do you think it is even well-structured, would you even have confidence in them to deliver a referendum for Kenyans?
The problem with IEBC, it's just like a public service transport vehicle. It's not an institution per se. It is actually made and tailored in the interest of the people who are going to capture power the next cycle. It is not working for the electoral culture in this country. It is not serving the electoral culture in this country. And so when you have, an indictment from the Supreme Court that actually questions basic paperwork, I mean, that commission by itself, by that virtue of that verdict, should have actually vacated office. But you can see they're still in office. And that is the same issue I was talking about, the impunity license that it keeps on perpetuating in terms of our institutions. So you have institutions which are do not even look at court orders anymore.
All right, Edward, thank you so much. Edward Wanyonyi there, who is a communication analyst, helping us understand a bit more of our top stories this morning. So grab your copy of the Saturday Standard and you'll get to take a look at some of those big stories. Of course, the NYS scam that I've just told you about, 2 people having to step down. And of course, Sonko saying, bring it on, even as it continues to nominate and stand on his Miguna Miguna nomination. Weekend Express is taking a quick commercial break. When we'll come back, we'll talk about why you need to pay attention to environment and why young people need to be at the forefront center when it comes to planting trees. So stay with us.